Thank you. Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Chairperson. First wish to express best wishes to my colleague, the Honourable Minister, as well as to his team for the best success in this ministry. I mean, it is a key social policy ministry. Housing is, in my opinion, one of the 3 or 4 major challenges faced by the government and people of this country. And I note that even though the Minister said, you know, 100% implementation this coming financial year on projects, and he also implied that, and I totally agree, that the state in a small island developing country such as Barbados cannot fulfill the housing expectations of its citizens. It is impossible. You know, ministers of housing, after ministers of housing from both administrations have come in with tremendous enthusiasm. Under the previous Barbados Labour Party administration of the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, I think at one time there was a projection to try and build 2,000 houses a year. Couldn't happen. There have been other projections even before, and it is impossible. As the Minister said, well, he revealed the figure that there are over 20,000 applications for housing or housing solutions at the ministry. I believe that recently, Minister, and you may wish to speak on this, you would have done a project in terms of trying to see how many of the applicants still need housing today, because as has been said, particularly by the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, some applications have been in there 15, 20 years. I think the Honourable Leader of the Opposition might have mentioned that. So how many applicants today need housing? But I know over the years, I mean, at one time, I know in a previous administration, there were about close to 30,000 applications. And it is impossible. Each of us, I'm sure, each of us members of Parliament, and certainly I could speak for myself, 3 days doesn't pass that a constituent of mine asks for a government house. And the truth of the matter is, let's face fact, in a lot of cases, some of those asking us for a government house really can't afford it, because they've now lost their job within the last year, but has been said that they're finding the present rent difficult to pay. The landlords, understandably, because a landlord is a businessman and needs money, pay mortgage, whatever, understandably asking them for rent. And the reality is that it falls on us as the people's representatives to come and ask us for housing solutions, and it's impossible to deal with. It is heart-wrenching, yes. Most of our constituents who ask are single mothers with children of an age, you know, below adulthood, children going to school, and it's heart-wrenching to be unable to provide the housing solution, but that is the reality. And it isn't going to change in any short period of time with the best political will in the world. I mean, we have looked at housing solutions that the Cubans are able to provide. The Cuban state probably has best been able out of the countries in our region to provide state housing for its people. But I mean, the truth is, outside of the Scandinavian countries, which have been able to fulfill most of the housing needs of its people who require state housing, and perhaps Singapore. There are very few other countries, if any, in the world that have been able to deal with this. And Minister, I want us with the enthusiasm and looking at that historical record to still temper it with reality. And the reality, in my submission, Madam Chair, is that we have to therefore provide the facilities for the private sector to be able to intervene and provide housing solutions too. And I understand that that is therefore the concept that the Minister and his Permanent Secretary are speaking about down Chancery Lane. But I mean, these are small tokens. I mean, the quads, yes, in White Park, that Honourable Minister you brought to the House last month, but what, 24 housing quads or 40, I can't remember which one. I mean, these are just small drops in the ocean, and really and truly are not going to make any fundamental difference to our ability to provide housing solutions for our people and those people who could afford housing solutions. General view of, I think, most of our constituents is that the NHC is going to provide housing that is below market cost in terms of rent or purchase price. And of course, that can't go anymore, Mr. Honourable Minister. But you
Honourable Member, is this a comment or you're rounding up to a question?
Well, I'm going to lead up to question.
Because you're past your time.
Okay, let me round off. So I'm just wondering what is the policy of the present policy of the ministry in terms of facilitating more private sector involvement, of course, within the rules. I'm not so sure that we have the land bank capacity now that we would have had when the Honourable Member for St. Andrew was First Minister of Housing. But how are we going to facilitate greater private sector involvement in the provision of housing? Are we going to, again, intervene at state level to reduce mortgage interest rates, for example, as was done in the last Barbados Labour Party administration at Barbados Mortgage Finance, which I think was done quite successfully, and at least get some more houses than the state could normally, under normal circumstances, provide. That's my first intervention. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the member for St. James North for his question. And I have to agree fully. Government cannot do everything. I would have said that at the opening. And the only way that we can even make a dent in what the requests are, or the requests that come in for housing, is with partnering with the private sector. And when we do that, it means a win for the person that gets an opportunity to get the house, a win for those who work in the private sector because of the creation of jobs, and working together is the only way that we can do it. And it means financing as well, coming a lot from the credit unions and from the banking institutions. That's the only way that we can get it done. So once we've made that decision, through the tender, we've looked for strategic partners, mainly to do the construction of the houses. The HOPE program is important because, as I said, a lot of people don't have the money to pay the deposit. So what the PE part, the photovoltaic part, the providing energy part, home ownership providing energy, gives an opportunity for that price of the deposit to be offset by a lease to be able to provide energy through the photovoltaic returns from the photovoltaic systems on their roof. So, and the HOPE, by the way, project is essentially a program where we would have a central location, a company who goes and negotiates discount contracts and negotiates with contractors, small contractors. Many of them, we're starting with the first 15 that would have responded to the tender. There'll be an additional tender for other contractors to come in, and build houses according to the Hope designs. We're starting at Lancaster. There are 186 lots there, and we're going to be launching that very shortly. The other program is a private contractor who also responded to the tender to be able to build houses, and he's not only building the houses, he's taking on the responsibility of putting in the roads and all of the services. Government doesn't have the money to put in the roads and all the services on the land that it has. So he's undertaken to put in the roads and the services, and then he will seek to find the people to buy the houses, and the government will be paid for the land. So we're trying to get as many housing solutions built. And yes, it's difficult because the cost of a house is very difficult, especially those in the private sector. But what we can control is the price of the land. And that's what we're doing. So we're trying to keep the price of the land down, or to offset the cost of the land, offset the cost of the services with these other ingenuitive activities that we're planning.
Honourable Member for St. James North, we invite your second question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Under sub-program 0532 of this head, there's an allocation of monies for tenants who are purchasing under the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, which of course is one of the landmark pieces of social legislation of a previous Barbados Labour Party government, starting with the Right Honourable Tom Adams. And I believe $750,000 being proposed for allocation for next financial year. I'm concerned over this concept. As I said, this is a piece of legislation that, 40 years ago, enfranchised thousands of Barbadians. We know the historical basis of it, and land ownership, and certainly within recent years, not enough funds were allocated to the ministry to allow the state to provide its subsidy as required under the law so that tenants could purchase the land on which they lived for 5 years or more. And certainly before I became cabinet minister, and I had situations in my constituency, Dublin Road, for example, where tenants paid in money to the state, their aspect of the subsidy, their part of the subsidy of the purchase price of the land, and the state didn't have the funds for its subsidy under the previous administration. So the state had the purchasers, my constituents' money for 8 years, not providing any interest on the subsidy, and unable or unwilling to provide what the subsidy should be, the part of the state subsidy, so that the purchasers can own the land. And I'm wondering, Honourable Minister, what is the policy on this here, whether you believe the $750,000 is sufficient for this purpose. I mean, I have tenants in my constituency, and my constituency is one of the few constituencies out of the 30 that does not have any National Housing Corporation housing. But it has tenants and tenantries, and the tenants want to own the property, the lots that they live on, like anybody else. And I'm wondering if this is sufficient funds for allocation. What is the policy on this? Permanent Secretary is well aware of what I'm speaking about, because this is not the first time he's been PS at the ministry. So I'll give the opportunity for a response on that.
Thank you. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member. First, let me say that I do understand the idea of some tenants wanting to own, But interestingly, we have provided a program for other tenants of the National Housing Corporation itself, to be able to come and purchase their land, and many people have not. And it begs the question, yes, some people want to purchase, and I think it goes back to maybe education as well, to educating our people that it is better to own their land rather than to continue being a tenant. And I think that is the part of the fundamental problem. Because we have many, and I wouldn't want to say, well, maybe I should, even a family member of mine who was a tenant of the National Housing Corporation before I was born. And I asked her, you have an opportunity, why don't you purchase the land? And she said, no, she's very comfortable being a tenant, and she will continue to be a tenant. And there are many people like that. So there's a combination. There's some who want to continue as tenants, and there are others who want to own. And I want to encourage those who are tenants to try to pursue ownership, because it gives you an opportunity to bequeath the land to your heirs and successors. It gives you an opportunity to mortgage land should you need to be able to access money urgently. There are many, many benefits to owning the land that you are on, that you've been a tenant on for many, many years. With respect to that particular program, I'm going to ask Ms. Nicole Johnson, Housing Planning, to explain the policy. Ms. Johnson.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. My name is Nicole Johnson. I'm the Chief Housing Planner at the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. With respect to the query raised by Minister Hinkson, the persons have to pay their share of the purchase price first before the government subsidy is disbursed. What we have found over the years is that we have only been receiving receipts from about 8 to 10 persons. So the funds allocated for that particular item represents what we've seen over the last couple of years. So we don't ask for, like, for example, $500,000, and then we don't utilize that in the subsidy. So once we know that we put in the amount of money that we know that we are able to pay each financial year, and the $375,000 that we ask for tends to cover the amount that is required to pay the subsidies. I am familiar with the Dublin Road St. James matter, and all of those subsidies have been paid to the persons. So those outstanding subsidies have been paid. Thank you.
And
Yes,
Madam Chair, my final intervention relates to housing for, and I thank the officer for that response, I really do. I'm aware that the Dublin Road, matters have been sorted out now. Like I said, it was under previous administration that I had, to use an unparliamentary word, goodies in trying to resolve. But housing now for I apologize. As I said, that's unparliamentary. I had tremendous difficulty with dealing with housing for persons.
We call that inguinal hernias.
Pardon?
Inguinal hernias, not goodies.
Hernias, okay. A neutral word. Housing for persons with disabilities. Again, a concern of mine. We know that the white paper, and I think followed up by a green paper, 20 years ago, or almost, 2001, 2003, under previous Barbados Labour Party government of the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, would have had as a matter of policy that 10% of state housing should be reserved for persons with disabilities. I am not so sure that any political administration subsequently has, either then or subsequently, has been able to fulfill that role. But again, it was a noble policy and concept, to try to accommodate some of the most vulnerable persons in this society. It would mean, obviously, that the houses identified the housing identified would be retrofitted for persons with disabilities in terms of their immobilities and maybe their hearing impairment, their visual impairment. And I'm wondering, Honorable Minister, if that is still the policy of your ministry, and if so, whether your ministry intends to ensure that it is not only the policy, but it is implemented as well. Because again, we owe it to persons with disabilities, some of our most vulnerable people, to have such a policy and implementation thereof in place. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.